Welcome everybody to this Mishcon Academy session. This is part of a series of our digital events, including podcasts and videos, where we tackle some of the biggest issues facing society today. Before I introduce our guest today, Caitlin Moran, we've got just a few housekeeping items. So first of all, if you've joined us online, you've automatically joined on mute and with your video off. Caitlin will kindly be taking some questions from the audience towards the end of our session. If you're in the room, please raise your hand then and we'll bring a mic to you. If you're online, you can drop your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen at any time and we'll pick them up towards the end. For those of you in the room, Caitlin is very kindly staying to sign some books at the end as well. So we will do that once we are offline. So I am very excited to introduce our multi-award-winning guest, Caitlin Moran. Caitlin tells me her Wikipedia entry does her any justice. She's actually won 27 awards.
But it only says 11 on the website, and every time I go and try it, they think that I'm lying. So if any of you wants to log on to my Wikipedia entry and update it for me, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Travesty.
It is.
We won't list all of them, but Caitlin's team has kindly given me some key points to know. So for those interested, Caitlin was born in Brighton in 1975, grew up in Wolverhampton, lives in London. At the age of 13, Caitlin changed her name from Catherine to Caitlin because you found the name in a Julie Cooper book?
Yes, in a Julie Cooper novel, yeah. I was like, I want to be her.
Yeah. Came up with the unusual pronunciation.
Yes, I thought it was pronounced Caitlin and I didn't know anybody else. So for 10 years, I didn't know it was wrong. And now it just makes everyone's life a misery and I'm so sorry.
But, you know, it's unique.
Yeah.
So at the age of 15, Caitlin wrote her first novel, which was The Chronicles of Narmo. Mm-hmm. And then since the age of 18, Caitlin's been writing for The Times, doing various things as a columnist, interviews. I had a whole list that your team gave me and I've lost where it is.
Okay. But I was interviewer of the year because I went to a sex club with Lady Gaga. I was critic of the year, mainly because I posted a lot of sexual fantasies about Sherlock when it was first on. I've been columnist of the year 8 times now because I am funny.
Yeah. Well, also, I've got here from Fiona on the team that apparently the most read section of the Sunday Times is the Celebrity Watch satirical column that you write.
Yes,
so,
yeah. I write about celebrities every week, but I try not to be horrible to them because I think we can learn something from them. Not often, but sometimes.
And so beyond the Sunday Times, Caitlin's written a number of books, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So her first bestseller, I think, was How to Be a Woman, which was named on the Sunday Times list of most influential books of the 2000s, also won the National Book Awards Book of the Year. We were an instant New York Times bestseller, published in 25 25
It's actually 38. That's another thing Wikipedia needs to sort out.
Okay, have a word with Fiona.
Yes.
To fix that, although Fiona has been amazing in every other respect. And then your 2020 sequel, More Than a Woman, was also a #1. Similar bestsellers, your novels How to Build a Girl and How to Be Famous. With How to Build a Girl, you adapted into a film starring Emma Thompson and Beanie Feldstein.
Yes.
Very exciting. And then with your sister, you co-wrote the Channel 4 sitcom Raised by Wolves, which won Best Sitcom at the Rosedale Awards. And your latest bestseller is the #1 book, What About Men, which is what we're going to focus about today. So, welcome.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for coming, everybody.
So, let's start at the start then. The genesis of What About Men. We've got a bit of a mixed audience here. I think most of us are huge fans. But could you just talk us through how you came up with the idea of writing this book after decades of being known as an avid feminist?
Yes, so I was very much women were my specialist topic, women and girls. I'd spent the last 10 years writing about women and girls. They're my crew. And every International Women's Day is a big day for me. I go and talk about the feminism and the women and girls in various places. And 2 years ago on International Women's Day, I was at an art school in North London, talking to an equal amount of teenage girls and teenage boys about International Women's Day and feminism. And I got about 4 minutes into the third question and some boys just started going, nah, we're not having this. Nah, feminism's gone too far. Girls are winning and boys are losing, feminists are Nazis. And I was shocked. We were in a North London art school. And the thing that surprised me the most was that these boys, these disruptive boys, were so angry. And once you learn that when you're dealing with someone who's angry, that underneath it all they're scared, anger is just fear brought to the boil. I found that incredibly intriguing, that this recent burst of feminism that we've had over the last 12 or so years has been so recent to me. This seems like, I'm 50, this seems like a very recent corrective to 10,000 years of the patriarchy. But to these teenage boys, it was their entire lives. They had grown up with hearing people saying, the future is female, girls can do anything. Here's a book about 50 amazing kick-ass women from history. Here are 50 women who are going to change the world. Here are the first women in space. And that was a revelatory moment to me, that basically that we've missed a generation of boys out. We didn't realise that while we were quite correctly talking about women and girls and improving their lives in so many ways, and we still have so much more to do to improve the lives of women and girls, that we have not been talking about boys at all. Except some people have, because this is the progressive left that has not been talking about boys. Into that gap has fallen the alt-right, has fallen the manosphere, has fallen Jordan B. Tate, has fallen Andrew Tate, sorry, and Jordan B. Peterson. And they are the only people, if you are a 15-year-old boy, going, I'm confused about my life, I'm scared about my prospects, I don't know how to be a man, I keep hearing that masculinity is toxic, does that mean I'm toxic? They are the only people who stood up and go, I'll talk about boys, and I'll tell you what will make your lives better. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I need to write a book. I'd waited for a long time to see if anybody else on the progressive left would write a book about being a man and masculinity. And in the end, it was like, okay, it's going to take a busy middle-aged woman to do this. I will try start the conversation about men and boys. I would try and make it chatty. I would try and make it humorous. I would try and make it fun. Because I think one of the most important things whenever we're talking about progress or any kind of cultural change is that it shouldn't be dutiful. I think very often when I first started writing about feminism, I think the reason that book was so big and was such a phenomenon and seemed to give so many women relief was that up until that point, feminism had been seen as so dry and so academic and something that you could get wrong. You had to have read the right books. You had to be saying the right phrases. You had to know the history of feminism. You had to know your first wave from your third wave. And I was like, no, I don't believe that progress should be dutiful, like eating your vegetables and consuming fibre. When we're talking about progress, it should be creative and joyful. You're going, I've got something to offer you. I've just come up with a way that the world could be better. Here's all these women from the past who've come up with all these great ideas. I am going to tell you about all these great ideas. I'm a fangirl for the idea of things getting better. Why shouldn't progress be fun? Why shouldn't improving your life be fun? Why shouldn't these discussions about what is difficult for us and what would improve our lives just be as much fun as sitting in the pub with your mates talking about your favourite pop band? So that was the sense that I wanted to encapsulate in What About Men, that we should be talking about boys, and it should not be, oh, boys are trouble, that masculinity is toxic, men are doomed, boys always cause trouble. It should be, no, boys are amazing, let's be joyful, let's be positive, but let's talk about the problems that boys and men face right now in 2025.
Yeah, and I think that theme of how do we raise boys in this generation that has only heard the negative things is really important. And the book is incredibly accessible, does a great job at talking about that, and a plethora of other issues. Couldn't possibly fit them all in one book. And when we were talking about this session, we had so much excitement and interest internally. One of the things that so many people said was, I'm raising boys.
Yes.
I'd love to get into that, talking about it, etc. I also had a few other points that people raised. Many of them you talk about in the book, including fatherhood versus motherhood, how that's very different. As men become older, what does it mean when perhaps you didn't curate your friendships the same way as women do? Loneliness, all of that. But one other thing that came up was, I don't know, going back to what you said about being dutiful, but also using the right language, people said to me, I don't know how to challenge things because I'm not a really angry 14-year-old boy. And I don't think that Andrew Tate is a role model, but how do I ask certain questions? And so they've tasked me with doing that.
Yes.
So one of them, Caitlin, is, as I say, you've spent decades talking about feminism, acknowledging the patriarchal challenges of society, etc. for women. So hear what you're saying, something needs to be done, and it's fallen to you to write this. But isn't it another example of women having to take up the duty, the onus as a caregiver? Why can't men sort themselves out?
Well, and that was very much my attitude for the first couple of years, because like I'd spent 15 years writing about women and girls. And whenever I did an event like this, we'd spend an hour talking about women and girls. And then the second or third question I would get from the audience would be someone going, yeah, but what about men? And I admit for the first 3 or 4 years, I was like, I don't care. They seem to be fine. I'm team tits. That's my crew. And then I realized a couple of things. That first of all, that often it wasn't a trick question. It was genuinely, a lot of the time it was mothers going, we need to talk about boys in the same way we're talking about girls. I feel there's so much advice for being a mother of girls, and feminism exists. So even if my girls don't want to talk to me about problems they have in their life, there's a million blogs and books and TV shows and movies that talk about how to be friends, how to deal with puberty, like how to deal with falling in love. There aren't those same resources for boys. And then the second thing that I thought, when people go, what about men? And was wondering, am I going to take the burden? I mean, it would just be the ultimate irony of feminism, basically, if women had to sort out women and then had to sort out men. But then I had a realization that however much we talk about the problems of women and girls and however many of those problems we solve, roughly 50% of any woman's problem is men. It's angry men, it's abusive men, it's sexist men, it's the boss that brings you down, it's the colleague who isn't pulling his weight, it's the troubled teenage son, it's the husband who doesn't fully acknowledge the emotional load and the domestic chores. And so we can't fix the girls until we fix the boys. If there are men out there who are going around with these ideas about women, if there are men out there with these things, if there are men out there that don't have the tools to cope with their own lives, if there are men who are becoming depressed, if there are men who are lonely, if there are men who can't contribute to fatherhood because of the way that things are structured, then this becomes a problem for women as well. So that was very much my ethos. It was like, we can't fix the girls until we fix the boys. We're all in this together. And when you were talking about advice for parents, it's been really interesting. I presume most people here who've got teenage children have recently watched Adolescence on Netflix, because we all just watched that in horror, right? Just going, oh my God, this is such bad news. An amazing show. But I was interested to see that once that broadcast, it started an international conversation of people going, there is a crisis in teenage boys. There is a crisis in adolescent boys. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's a crisis in fathers. It's a crisis in this generation of fathers. In the recent Lost Boys report, there was a frightening statistic that said that teenage boys are more likely to have an iPhone than to have a father at home. And if we look at the different ways that we parent our children, again, in the last 10 or 15 years, the way that mothers have started talking to their teenage girls has changed unrecognisably from when I was growing up. Women will sit their girls down now and go, be proud about your body, be proud of having ovaries, be proud of having a vagina. Let's go on Etsy and get you some little ovary brooches, like kind of girls talking about their bodies in a proud way, and mothers going, yes, women's bodies are amazing, you be proud of it. However you are is an incredible and notable thing. The idea of a father sitting down with his son and saying, be proud of your penis, seems unthinkably weird and mad. But then I assure you, I grew up in the 80s and it was equally unthinkable and mad for a mother then to sit down and say to her daughter, be proud of your ovaries. So we know these things can change. We just need to see templates. We need to be aware of what we're not doing and then start coming up with templates for how we can change these kind of behaviours. And the way that we approach fatherhood is still so underrated. We still do not see the values of fathers. When I write about middle age in this book, the thing that I heard over and over and over again from middle-aged fathers who were on their second families, their first families had imploded, there had been a divorce and they had got married again and they had started a second family. The thing those men said over and over again is, I'm enjoying it this time around. This time around, I'm changing the nappies. This time around, I'm there for the night feeds. This time around, I'm there to play with them. And when you talk to them, they wanted to be there the first time around for that first family, but the pressure is so intense on young men to make something of their career at that point. The onus is always put on young men. We still presume it'll be women who will step back and go part-time, and it'll be the men that will work full-time. That we've now got a position where whole families are breaking up with the subsequent impact that has on society and the subsequent impact it has on those families. When you talk to those middle-aged men, very often they're like, yeah, the kids from the first marriage it's a difficult situation. Like, they took their mum's side, like they don't want to talk to me on the phone. Simply because we still have not looked at valuing young fathers. We wait until they do it again the second time around. Now, if women were talking about a problem with childcare in this way, if we had noticed this as a problem for us, we would be signing petitions about that. We would be marching for that. We would be talking about changing legislation and workplace practices, because we have a feminist movement and that's what we do. When we see a problem with women, we bitch with other women about it, we name that problem, and then we start organising to change it. But because there is no such thing as a men's movement, because men do not like to complain, because there isn't any template for men talking about a problem in their lives and then organising together and forming a movement and changing it, you see this recurrent thing, and it's one of the most recurrent words that I use in the book, a stoicism about how men feel about the problems in their lives. There's a chapter in there called Why Men Don't Go to the Doctor, which was based on the fact that my husband would never go to the doctor. And when I was speaking to a friend of mine who is a doctor, she said, there's a difference between men and women who come into my surgery. When the women come in and I say, why are you here? They list their symptoms. When the men come in and I say, why are you here? They say, my wife made me come. Men are very reluctant to go to the doctors. And there were 4 reasons for this. One, men were scared. They were scared they'd left it too long and they were going to get bad news. They were scared they were going to be told off, that the doctor was going to say, you drink too much, you eat too much bacon, like kind of you're a naughty boy. But the third one was men going, I don't think I should put myself in that queue. I think women should be seen first. I think children should be seen first. I think the elderly should be seen first. I don't want to push into the queue. It's women and children first in the lifeboats, like kind of I don't want to push into that queue. And there is no hierarchy of mental or physical pain. If you are a man who is worried about a lump on his neck, if you are a man who is worried about your mental health, you are just as entitled to be in that queue as a woman or someone elderly or a child. But there was this stoicism when men were talking about their problems. They just go, that's what it's like to be a man. I don't want to complain, stiff upper lip, like kind of no one wants to listen to a man going on about his man flu, like kind of, and they would just go, okay, this is just what I'm going to do. I'm going to firm it out. I'm not going to complain. And I hate that for men. I think it is damaging for you, and I think it is damaging for your boys, because when you look at what people say are the problems with teenage boys, it is that they cannot reach out and get help. They do not have the same kind of close female friendship groups that women and girls have. They're not able to talk about their problems because they're being stoic. And women have spent the last 100 years learning to rebel against all the ideas of being a woman. If you say women don't do this, women should do that, women have spent the last 100 years going, women can do anything. Like kind of, we will rebel against this. We're going to redefine what it is to be a woman. Men and boys have not yet learned to rebel when someone says, men don't do that, or this is what men do. They go, okay, I'll be stoic. I will not complain. Yeah. And I hate that for men and boys. You need to rebel.
And that idea of communication, talking about feelings, both men to men and with women, etc., I think it's a common thread when you talk about the various issues of the book. I mean, I should say, Caitlin and I have discussed it, it's necessarily focused on heterosexual men.
Oh, yes.
Because there's just too much even with that one category of men, right? But we have acknowledged that it's not the same for
gay culture,
all men,
right? Culture, yeah.
And then picking up on that Stoicism, I think health is a really good example of the power of that, because we all know that men's health or medicine is predominantly based on research into men. We know that women have been excluded from clinical trials, et cetera, et cetera. There was also, it turns out, Men's Health Week this month, 9th to 15th of June. So in a bid to try and end this with some practical takeaways and a higher note, there is a Men's Health Week every year. And I find it really interesting that we, I suppose, need that, but also I had no idea. I looked it up specifically for this.
Isn't it funny though, because you never hear about, I had no idea that Men's Health Week was happening. And as a journalist, you're always looking for something you can peg a column on, no idea. International Men's Day does happen. Every time there's an International Women's Day, you get lots of people on the internet going, when's there an International Men's Day? Seems like it's all about the women.
12th of November.
Yes, it's 12th of November. The comedian Richard Herring always goes on the internet and